The NFL schedule just dropped, and Cowboys Nation is absolutely losing it over how much our guys are being forced to travel this season. And before we dive into whether Dallas is actually getting screwed or if there's something else going on here, you need to hit that subscribe button right now because we're covering every single Cowboys update the second it breaks. And honestly, we're not getting the subscriber support. We need to keep bringing you this content. So do me a solid and smash that subscribe button, because what I'm about to show you is going to make you question everything about how the league treats America's team. Let's get straight into it because the numbers don't lie. And when you see where the Cowboys rank in total miles traveled this year compared to the rest of the league, you're going to understand why fans are fired up. Right now, Dallas sits at 4th in the entire NFL for most miles traveled based on round-trip flights from stadium to stadium, and we're talking serious distance here, like the kind of travel that wears down a roster over 17 games plus playoffs if we're lucky. San Francisco leads the pack at number 1, which honestly they might have a legitimate gripe about, then the Rams at 2, Texans at 3, and boom, there's our Cowboys at 4 with the Patriots rounding out the top 5. Now here's the thing, Dallas is still significantly behind the Niners in total miles, so it's not like we're getting destroyed worse than everyone else, but this is the most the Cowboys have traveled in years, and it's likely a franchise record when you factor in the international game that we haven't done since way back in 2014. You heard that right, over a decade since the Cowboys played outside the United States, and now suddenly we're being shipped off to Brazil in week 3, which I'll get to in a second because that's the biggest factor in all of this. So let's talk facts, and then we'll get into whether the NFL is actually out to get us, or if there's a reasonable explanation that doesn't involve some grand conspiracy theory that Jerry Jones made enemies with Roger Goodell again. The data comes from bookies.com, and shout out to Bill Sparrows for putting this together because when you look at the raw numbers, it's hard to argue that the Cowboys aren't being asked to log some serious air miles this season. We're looking at almost 28,000 miles total, which is a massive jump from the last 4 years, where Dallas averaged somewhere between 16 and 22,000 miles. And most of those years, they were hovering around that 18th to 20th spot in the league, which is pretty standard for an NFC East team. But here's where it gets interesting and where I think some fans are jumping to conclusions too fast. The single biggest reason the Cowboys are so high on this list is that Week 3 matchup against the Ravens in Brazil. That one game, that one so-called home game that got moved from AT&T Stadium all the way to Rio de Janeiro, added over 10,000 miles by itself. Let me put that in perspective for you because 10,000 miles is absolutely insane when you break it down. That's more than the total travel that 2 entire NFL teams are doing this season. Carolina and Cleveland are both under 10,000 miles for the whole year, and the Bears are just barely above it. So one trip to Brazil for the Cowboys equals what some franchises are doing for an entire season of road games. If that Brazil game didn't exist, if the NFL had just let Dallas host Baltimore at home, like a normal game, the Cowboys would be sitting at 19th in the league for travel miles, which is actually right in line with where they've been the past few years, and honestly, even a little better than some recent seasons. So, the question becomes, is the NFL screwing the Cowboys? Or is this just the reality of participating in the international series that we've been dodging for over a decade? And the crazy part is the Cowboys haven't played an international game since 2014, which is the longest gap of any franchise in the NFL. So it's not like we've been getting hammered with London trips every other year while teams like Jacksonville have basically adopted England as a second home. The league rotates these international games based on home schedules, and here's the truth that nobody is talking about. Other owners don't want to give up a Cowboys home game, because when Dallas comes to town, it's the biggest ticket seller of the year. Go ask the Giants, go ask the Eagles, the Commanders, the Ravens, the Steelers. Literally every team that hosts the Cowboys will tell you that game is their #1 revenue generator outside of playoff runs. So why would any owner willingly send that game overseas and lose out on all that cash? They wouldn't, and that's why Dallas has gone so long without an international game. But now it's their turn to host one, and the NFL picked Brazil, which is about as far as you can get, without literally sending us to Australia like they did with the Rams and Niners for week 1. So yes, the travel is brutal. Yes, it's going to be a grind on the players. And yes, it's fair to be frustrated that one game is adding 10,000 miles to the season. But calling it some grand conspiracy where the league is trying to sabotage Dallas feels like a stretch when you consider we've been avoiding these trips for years, while other teams have been doing them regularly. Now let's break down the rest of the travel schedule, because even without Brazil, the Cowboys would still be dealing with some decent mileage, and a lot of that comes down to the division we play in. Every single year, Dallas racks up around 8,000 miles just from NFC East games alone, and that's because none of these matchups are close. Flying to Philly, flying to Washington, flying to New York, those aren't short hops, and when you do it twice a year for each team, it adds up fast. To put that in perspective, 8,000 miles just for division games is almost as much as the Panthers are traveling in total this season. So even in a year where we don't go international, the Cowboys are already starting with a higher floor than a lot of teams just because of geography. Then you add in the fact that this year we're going to Seattle, which is a West Coast trip. We're going to the Rams, which is another West Coast trip. We've got Green Bay up north and Indy in the Midwest. And suddenly you're looking at a schedule that's just naturally going to involve a lot of miles. The only close game we really get is Houston and maybe the Saints when we play them every few years. But outside of that, the Cowboys are logging airtime almost every week. And here's the thing. This is why West Coast teams almost always rank high in travel miles, because unless they're playing each other or the AFC West, most of their games require flying across the country. San Francisco, Seattle, the Rams, the Chargers, they're always near the top of this list because the majority of the league is east of them. So when they have crossover games or play NFC East opponents, they're racking up miles like crazy. It's just the reality of the map. And it's not some targeted attack on those franchises. It's basic geography. So where does that leave us as Cowboys fans, and should we be genuinely worried that all this travel is going to hurt our chances this season? Honestly, I don't think travel is the death sentence some people are making it out to be, and here's why. Let's look at the 5 teams that traveled the most miles last year: the Chargers, the Rams, the Seahawks, the Jags, and the Niners. All 5 of those teams won at least 11 games. And if you remember, the Seahawks went on to win the whole thing while dealing with just as much, if not more, travel than anyone else in the league. So clearly, it's possible to handle a tough travel schedule and still compete at a high level. It's not ideal, and yeah, it would be nice to have a lighter load, but it's far from a guaranteed excuse for failure. What matters more than the miles is how the team handles it, how much Jerry is willing to spend on quality travel arrangements, the hotels they stay in, the flights they book. All of that stuff impacts how fresh the guys are on game day. If Dallas is smart about the Brazil trip, if they plan it right and don't just treat it like a regular road game, if they take care of the players and make sure everyone's rested and recovered, then there's no reason this can't be a season where we still make noise despite the mileage. But here's what I'll say. It does suck that we're being asked to do this in week 3, because I would have much rather seen that Brazil game scheduled around week 9 or 10, right before the bye, so the guys could travel, play the game, and then get a full week off to recover. Having it in week 3 means we're dealing with that brutal trip early in the season and then grinding through the rest of the schedule without a natural recovery point built in, and that's where the NFL could have done us a favor with the scheduling, but clearly didn't. At the end of the day, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. The Cowboys aren't being targeted by some grand conspiracy, but they are dealing with a legit tough travel schedule that's going to test the depth and conditioning of this roster. The Brazil game is the main culprit, and without it, we'd be sitting pretty average in terms of miles traveled, but we have to play it, and that's just reality. The division games are always going to add up because of where we're located. And there's nothing anyone can do about that unless the NFL wants to realign the whole conference, which is never happening. What I want to see is how this coaching staff manages the travel, how they keep guys healthy and fresh, and whether or not they use it as an excuse if things go sideways or as motivation to prove they can handle adversity. If you're a real contender, you find a way to win no matter how many miles you fly. And if the Cowboys are serious about competing for a championship this year, then this travel schedule is just another obstacle to overcome, not a reason to fold. So before we wrap this up, make sure you're subscribed because we're going to be tracking every game, every trip, every injury report, and every locker room storyline as this season unfolds. And honestly, we need your support to keep growing this channel. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single breakdown. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the NFL is doing the Cowboys dirty with this schedule? Or is this just part of the game and we need to stop complaining? Would you have rather seen the Brazil game later in the season? Or are you cool with getting it out of the way early? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now because I read every single one, and I want to know how Cowboys Nation feels about this. Let's get this conversation going, and let's get ready for what's about to be one of the wildest travel seasons in franchise history. This is Blue and Silver Nation, and we'll see you in the next one.